Welcome to Everything Recycled. Today we are going to do something very special, which is learn how to make these beautiful giant origami balloons. Getting straight into it, the best thing about these balloons is that they are collapsible. So they're held together by string and you can collapse them down, and essentially they look like this when they're done, which means you can store them flat and reuse them over and over and over again. What are they made from? Well, okay, to get them big I needed big paper, and I love recycling, so I am redeeming my Uber Eats delivery bags. Non-spawn. So the first thing I need to do, because I'm using recycled materials, is essentially break them down. And the reason these are a good product to use for this project is because when you break them down and then open them up along the glue line, as I have here, you get a really long rectangular piece, which is what you actually need to be able to make it all the way around the circle. And what I'm doing is essentially folding off the handles and trimming it down, and off any edges that kind of tore when I pulled it apart. So I'm going to do the top and bottom edge to get the paper to be as crisp as humanly possible. And then we're going to begin folding. So here you can see we are folding it in half along the vertical line. And what my hands are describing is essentially what we're doing is making the vertical lines of squares, right? And those points are going to be made up of diagonal lines along those squares. And the shorter your rectangle is, like the fatter it is, the fatter your project is going to be. The more narrow your rectangle is, the more oblong and tall your project is going to be. So the more rectangles you add in this step, the less circular your project will be. So the minimum amount of rectangles is 16. So you're going to fold your paper in half lengthwise, half again, half each of those sections, halve them again, and do that all the way down until you get 16 sections, like I'm doing here. And it does take some time, so this will take me a full minute, just because it's one of the longest steps. So after you're done folding lines into your rectangle, you should be able to open up your paper and see something a little like this. 16 separate rectangles. Amazing. Look at them all there. So what I'm pointing to here is the original folds from the paper, because I'm using recycled paper. Be wary. It's very important that you don't accidentally fold along any of those lines in any of the next steps. Now we are going to do a single fold in the other direction, folding down the length of our paper right in half. So best way to do this is to get each of your folds to line up. And this is essentially the center line. You can make some of them without the center line once you get good, but to start I would fold the center line because it keeps everything else nice and tidy. So from that center line, we're going to fold in towards the center, so making sure your paper that you want on the outside is on the outside. Diagonally along each two rectangles. So you can see here these X's are across 2 rectangle sections. I'm going to go corner to corner towards the midline, and essentially that's how we create this beautiful cross stitch pattern. This takes ages, which is why I cut it out. Once you have that cross stitch pattern, you're essentially going to pop each of the vertical folds to be valleys and each of the diagonal folds to be mountains. Now I know that sounds ridiculous. It's also good to remember that in this shot, the inside of my balloon is actually down now because I flipped it over several times. So you can see here, this is a little bit of a struggle. You're essentially going to collapse all of them down, and this is going to start to form that round shape. Now, what I really recommend doing is, I didn't do it here because I couldn't pick it up on camera, but I would really recommend using gravity. So hang it off the edge of whatever you're doing and use gravity to help pull the folds down, especially when you're doing giant origami. Little origami, easy peasy. Giant origami takes longer and is quite difficult to wrangle sometimes. So essentially, this is going to be only a couple minutes here, but this also takes a really long time. So once I got pretty fast, I would say I could make one an hour. Just keep that in mind if this is a project that you're thinking of doing. I do also sell these, so if you don't want to do it, you can buy it. And once you're done, you can see we now have that round shape. So you're going to squash this nice and flat. When you're folding, it's also good to kind of force the folds to make the corners themselves instead of pinching the corners, because that will get it a lot crisper. And I usually do that by pushing in the middle of the fold and letting the fold then follow through and sharpen the corner. So here I'm just doing some adjustments, some of that fold sharpening, and essentially it's gonna look like an accordion, a very rectangular accordion. So to get it to look like a balloon, we essentially need to make it into a round shape. And the way that we do that is by overlaying 2 of those diagonal folds on the edges here, and essentially 2 whole rectangles on each end are going to sit on top of each other and click in almost like Lego pieces. And this takes a little bit of finessing. I always put them together after I'm done folding just for the satisfaction, but I would recommend using the string. But essentially, those edges where those valley folds are going to fold into each other and you won't even see them once it's all pulled tight. So you can see here I'm kind of just fiddling with it a bit. I left this slow because I wanted you to be able to see that it does take a bit of finessing, and if I'm holding both ends you can see it's kind of still falling apart a little bit, but it's forming this round shape. Once you have the string in, they hold together really well, and you'll feel it when it's all clicked into place. So to hold it together, we're gonna punch some holes into these triangle sections all the way along. So each half triangle needs 1 hole in it, so each big triangle needs 2 holes in it, and the closer you can get them to the point of the diamond next to it, the tighter and neater the top and tail of your balloon will be. So notice I'm not doing them in the center of each of the triangles. I'm doing them towards the far corners where right next to another one. So that's just something when you're putting it together that I would recommend doing. They do need to go in those little triangles though, because if you put them in the diamonds they will be visible in the final product. And you're going to do that and punch holes all the way down both sides. Punch, punch, punch. So you can see here that we've got holes along both sides, and most importantly we kept all of the folds in their folded position, and now comes the fun part. So we're going to take the string and we're going to string it through every hole. Pay attention to the way that I'm threading these through, because if you do it wrong it's going to sit funny. You want it to be in the little triangle on the outside and on the diamond on the inside, if that makes sense, of your paper. So just see here, copy exactly what I'm doing. And you're going to do that on the top, and then you're going to turn it around and also do it on the bottom. And what you're not going to do is put it in those overlapping triangles on the end. So those last two rectangular sections on each end, you're going to leave them and you're going to do them last. So make sure you leave enough of the tail on both ends that it doesn't accidentally come unstrung while you're stringing it together. And so then for your overlapping parts, you're going to take those two rectangles and slot them together, and then you're going to thread the string through the top and tail of each of those. So here you can see I'm coming from the inside, and you go out the under layer, out the top layer, in the top layer, and in the under layer. And that's very important because you want your strings to end up on the inside of your rectangle, of your triangle, of your balloon. It makes a lot more sense when they're all strung together when you're doing it, but that's just very important. So remember, out the under layer, out the top layer, in the top layer, in the under layer, and it should work out fine. Then you're going to finesse it and pull those strings tight so that it looks like this on the end, and just finesse it very gently. You don't want anything to rip. This also does take a little bit of time, and then you can see it's come together really nicely, and we have this beautiful round shape. And here is the final product. If you like this or want to give it a go yourself, let me know in the comments, send me photos, and please like, subscribe and share.